to jump up, people, are you ready? Windies in the land, just put up your hand. It's time to party.
Hello everyone and welcome to On Tour. It's the cricket program where we look at the West Indies and their tour of New Zealand. I'm Barry Wilkinson. Thank you so much for joining us. They were caned by Mr. Williamson on day 1 and 2, and now on day 3 the West Indies are in a lot of trouble. We look at the scorecard and that is a very woeful tale at the moment. 519 for 7 declared made by the Kiwis. The West Indies started so promisingly on day 2 in terms of how they ended 49 without loss. And then to be bowled up for 138 was just disastrous. They haven't really recovered. Even though we've seen some rearguard resistance, 196 for 6 thanks to Blackwood and Azari Joseph. Generally, we anticipate with a trailing of 185 runs. The writing is on the wall for what could very well be a very big defeat. Well, look, it has not been pretty for the West Indies. Their batting continues to be a major problem. We've got Tino Best, the former Barbados and West Indies fast bowler. We also got, on the ground, Aaron Vowles, the cricket connoisseur. He's on the ground. And our lead correspondent there, Mr. Vinod Mamchan. He is, of course, with us. Gentlemen, first of all, Tino, case summary, brief summary. West Indies on day 3, your thoughts?
Woeful. Very disappointed. It started the day brightly, 49 without loss. One would have got up. Well, not really got up, but started the evening.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing the West Indies bat. And it was a disappointing score. 138 all out. And then Axe still follow on. They're still in trouble. So, very disappointing.
Let's go to the cricket connoisseur, Mr. Aaron Vowles. He's the biggest man on social media. He's on target. Aaron, tell me, when you look at the West Indies and you look at the stats, look at the facts, from the beginning, things were stacked heavily against them in terms of how they have performed in New Zealand in recent history.
Yeah, 100%. Of course it was. Other than that Darren Bravo knock in Auckland a few years ago, they have been under the cosh in New Zealand, and nothing really changed today, unfortunately. New Zealand were absolutely fantastic with the ball. I'm sure we'll talk about this later on in the show, but Tim Southey, Trent Boult, Jameson and Wagner, absolutely sensational. So, yeah, unfortunately, as you said, Barry, the writing does seem to be on the wall. Of course, this rearguard action has given them a slight glimmer of hope, but yeah, the signs aren't looking great for the West Indies, unfortunately, at the moment.
Vinod Mamchan, our lead correspondent, how do you read it? And how do you read this tour that's going by the West Indies, losing the T20 series 2-0, and now the writing on the wall for a defeat, a heavy defeat in the first test?
As Tino Best said, it's really a woeful performance. And if that is the best in terms of the batting that we could offer on tour of New Zealand, well, then our batting seems to be worse off than the Caribbean economy.
All right. Well, let's sink our teeth into it. 49 without loss. It was a promising start. In fact, when I was in town today, a gentleman said, Barry, I'm feeling really good about how the West Indies are responding. And I said, do not get too excited yet. The precedent of West Indies is that they give you these good starts, but then they don't turn them into anything. And I was on point because we start, first of all, we're looking at young Campbell, who was very impressionable, of course, on the second day. But then he just gave it away, playing a very, very irrational shot to get out, and that started the rut for the West Indies on day 3.
Yeah, I mean, when you saw Tim Southey start at him, I said, he's bowled 3 balls nipping back at you, Campbell. He's took the third slip out, put him at straight mid-wicket. He's going to bluff you. Please don't fall in the trap. The only ball he can bowl is going across you. Don't play any stupid shot. And so said, so done. And I was like, wow, seriously, young man. But I thought he batted well in the lead up to that shot. And it's just a matter of concentration. I just think that it's not about talent, no. It's about getting a psychologist in and just trying to help these young cricketers to get past the 20s and the 30s. I mean, the fans are tired. I'm a retired player now, and I'm tired as well.
Yeah, look, Vinod, when we look at these dismissals, we're watching some of the dismissals as they happen. Brooks looking very uncertain. We look at even Darren Bravo, who began to look like he was shaping up, but then at the end of it, he was outplayed by a beautiful ball, one that just dipped, swung a little bit, and he was bowled. When you look at these dismissals as we are watching them, what do they say in terms of how we were bowling? And then now they are bowling, and the ball seems to be swinging, the ball seems to be moving around, and there seems to be a more tactical plan. What does it really say in your words, Vinod?
Definitely a more tactical plan, and obviously the Kiwis would have done their homework, and they had a plan for each of the batsmen. I thought that our batsmen, though, really did the work for the New Zealand bowlers, because if you look at the mode of dismissals, Barry, they were all stuck at the crease, and no one was really getting into line, no footworks at all. They were just there poking, and it was only a matter of time before they would have been, an edge would have been nicked off, and we saw that. And Tino summed it up beautifully with young Campbell. He's a positive player, but definitely the mental aspect of his game, again, was found wanting. And as I said the previous day, the critical moment for the West Indies would have been about an hour into the day's play, where both openers would have needed to still be there. That didn't happen, and he was outfoxed. And we continue to see our batsmen make fundamental errors. As I said before, Barry, they were stuck in their crease, and unfortunately, they were not stuck out there in the middle.
Look, so Southee, 4 for 35, Jamieson, 2 for 25. A word on Tim Southee. Just look at that graphic. I mean, he's now one of the leading bowlers for New Zealand all time, and then he's in the top 10. Quickly before we go to break, 30 seconds if you had to tell me about how good Tim Southee is as a bowler. Yeah,
Tim Southee has improved tremendously. And what I love about what New Zealand has done for this young man is give him time to develop his game. I remember when Tim Southee first started off, he was average, but repetitions, getting the opportunity to play. They weren't dropping in and picking him back and not giving him opportunities. They let him grow. And he's grown into one of the best fast bowlers that New Zealand has ever produced at this level. So kudos to the New Zealand selectors for keeping the faith with him and for him to continue to believe in himself. And he's done terrific. And 278 test wickets now?
Yeah. In
70 odd tests? Fantastic.
Wonderful stuff. You're watching On Tour, West Indies versus New Zealand at Hamilton. When we come back, we'll look at the second innings and where the West Indies obviously didn't learn from the first mistakes made in the first. Stay with us.
The toughest time to jump up, people, are you ready? Windies in the land, just put up your hand. The toughest time to jump up, people, are you ready? Windies in the land, just put up your hand.
So welcome back to On Tour. The West Indies in some trouble there in New Zealand. 138 they were bowled up for. And then in the second innings now, 196 for 6. You look at how things have shaped up for them. Rear guard reaction by, of course, Jermaine Blackwood and Alzarri Joseph. But when you start from the top, Campbell, I mean, he had a very controversial dismissal, but it just seemed to me that he did not learn from the lessons that would have been made in that first innings. I'm going to bring in Aaron here. Aaron, let's talk about this dismissal. When we look at it, did that ball touch the turf? Because the third umpire took a long time, a very, very long time. And it seemed to me that Campbell, even though he was rash, did not get the benefit of the doubt with this particular decision.
Yeah, I'd agree, Barry. It was a very, very touch and go decision in many, many ways. I think the key here was, of course, the soft signal. The umpire gave it out and they couldn't really have anything conclusive to overturn it. Now, I've been looking on social media looking for some reaction. One of the things that has popped up is the rendering between 3D and 2D images. It may have appeared as though it hit the fingers. It's a very, very tough and controversial decision, no matter which side you're on, really. So, very, very unlucky from John Campbell. But again, it comes back to the same things time and time again from the West Indies. It's not only concentration, it's discipline, and it's also temperament. And that's what I feel is lacking at times today. The fact is, he could have just left that. In the first innings, he was, only 40% of his balls he left.
Yeah.
And he ended just prodding and poking. So I agree the dismissal itself could be seen as controversial, but yeah, it could also have been nullified.
We're looking at some of these dismissals now as we speak, and when you look at some of them, is the ball? I mean, I could be seeing it wrong, but is the ball beginning to even swing a bit more than it was on the opening day when the West Indies would have won the toss and decided to bowl?
Yes, I'd say so, yes, because the fact is, at Seddon, there's a lot of cloud cover today. I mean, you saw it with Tim Southee, you saw it with Bolt. They're getting it to move absolute corners. It was swinging like a rusty barn door at times. It was absolutely sensational. Of course, their wrist positions were absolutely sensational as well. But yes, I do think the ball's doing a lot more. I don't necessarily think it was doing a lot more off the surface. I just think at Seddon Park, I think Jitan Patel said it on commentary, the overhead conditions really do dictate the day's play. And today that happened. So yes, I'd agree. It was definitely swinging a lot more. I believe 2 degrees more than it was on day 1 and 2.
Tino, you played at Hamilton. You've played at this very same ground. What is going to be the strength for the batsmen? Can they find any comfort in anything to draw on about that surface going into day 4?
Well, the New Zealand bowlers are very skillful, and that showed in the way they bowled. They attacked the stumps. Obviously, they did not allow the West Indies to get a rhythm. Going into day 4, honestly, Barry, the West Indies just will continue to bat. Blackwood, anything is possible. Look, Dinesh Ramdane and myself put on 150 runs in a test match for the last wicket. Anything is possible in cricket. So I'm not going to write off the boys just yet. I think they're still going to fight. I would love to see Azari get 100. I would love to see Jermaine Blackwood get 200. So I'm backing the boys all the way.
Vinon, a word on Jermaine Blackwood. He's only got 1 test century. He's got about 12 half centuries. He's on 80 now. How have you found that he's batted in this particular innings? Continues to throw caution to the wind?
Well, again, Barry, you saw that he took the game to the Kiwis. He fought back. And again, the mental aspect of the game came in for him. He's one of those forthright batsmen. And he showed that he was equal to them. He could have battled with them. He took on Wagner, and Wagner had 2 for 5, and in no time had 2 for 36, because he showed that he had the mental capacity. He had the confidence to go against these guys. So I don't think it was about throwing caution to the wind. I think it was more about a tough mental strength coming to the fore, and he really looked good. He's still there battling. And, we've seen this before. We saw it in the first test at the Aegis Bowl against England recently. And you're seeing it coming to the fore again.
I also want to spend a little time talking about Alzarri Joseph's batting ability. Tino, this young man from Antigua, 54 not out, has always had batting ability. The partnership so far is worth 101. What makes him so special with that batting ability?
Toby Radford. And I'll tell you what, I remember having a conversation with Toby Radford many moons ago, and he said that Alzarri Joseph is going to be a very good lower order batsman. You just need to spend time with him. Well, obviously, Toby is working with Bangladesh, but he's really took on board what Toby have taught him, and he looks fantastic. And I back him. I know that he was probably thinking about getting wickets, and that's what builds your confidence as a bowler. But really and truly, he looks good. I know he's a cricketer. And as Phil Wallace always say, you want to be a cricketer, and this young man is a cricketer, and just not a bowling specialist and so forth, or a T20 specialist. He is an all-round cricketer, and I think he can really develop into someone who is a very good lower order batsman.
It's interesting. We've had a situation where Joseph and Blackwood, put another 100-run partnership, have had little difficulty in negating the swing of someone like Wagner, someone like Trent Boult, someone like Southee. They've looked at home, and I just think, Tino, the pitch looks now much easier for batting.
Yeah, it's all about discipline. All the West Indies needed to do is weather the storm. I take you back to a spell that Alzarri Joseph bowled at Kane Williamson. It was a 3-over spell, 18 balls. And that was the best spell that was bowled at King Williamson. And he weathered that storm, Barry. And that is what the West Indies batsmen needed to do. They needed to weather the storm. And they didn't do that, and they come up short, and they bowl out for 138. I know they're 196 for 6. And you got Blackwood 80 not out. And you got a bowler who's being picked for his bowling. It is 50-odd. And Shamar Brooks and the Craig Brathwaite and all the batsmen have to be saying to themselves, what have I done? That's the worst feeling. to see the batsman coming and doing a better job than you as a batsman,
Yeah.
honestly.
These
So
bowlers, yeah.
I hope that they can learn from the mistakes. I do believe in this group of players. I know they have the talent, but it's not about talent at this level. It's about execution. And I just hope that they can execute the next opportunity that they get.
All right, you're watching On Tour. When we come back, no Shane Dowrich. We haven't seen him. He still has that injury. He's unlikely to bat in the second innings. So this could very well be 196 for 7 with these two pair at the crease, the last with just Roach and Gabriel to come. You're watching On Tour on Flow Sports. We'll be back with the final segment.
The toughest time to jump up, people, are you ready? Windies in the land, just put up your hand. The toughest time to jump up, people, are you ready? Windies in the land, just put up your hand.
Welcome back to On Tour as we look at the West Indies tour, of course, of New Zealand. Things not looking too well for them. We're going to go to the live action in just a moment. 196 for 6. Aaron Vowles, the cricket connoisseur, is with us. Aaron, you know, earlier we heard Tino and Vinod. They alluded to the fact about how the batsmen are not moving their feet, batting in their crease. Haven't they learned from Stuart Broad in England this year when things were perhaps just the same in terms of their technique or the lack thereof showing up?
Well, yeah, you'd hope so. Obviously, learning lessons from that tour of England. The only thing that I will say about Darren Bravo, at least he does have a bit of an excuse. I believe he has a sprained ankle. He was looking, let's say, not so mobile when he was running today, obviously due to that injury. But yeah, I agree. It is a weakness that's popping up again and again and again. And if you're going to be a successful team in Test cricket, you have to be able to successfully negotiate. So if we do lose this game, even if we just see some improvements, as Vinod said, moving the feet, maybe getting to the ball and playing it nice and late underneath the eye line, then at least we're going to see some improvement and they can take that lesson on board. But yeah, I agree. At the moment, it's not looking great for the West Indies, unfortunately.
You know, Tino, we've talked a lot about Southee. We've talked a lot about Jamieson. Let's spend a moment on Wagner. Has he been as impactful as people would have thought so far in this Test match?
Yeah, I mean, he's bowled beautifully. He's being smart. He dismissed Jason Holder with a full ball, but it was a no ball. And what Neil Wagner does for this bowling attack is he is the enforcer. And I would love to see one of the West Indies bowlers in terms of Nazari Joseph be the enforcer for the Windies. But Neil has bowled well. I always say he's my spirit animal because the way that New Zealand has used him over the last 6-7 years has been tremendous. So kudos to them. Neil Wagner came from South Africa, and I know he's a big boy in New Zealand cricket. So it's all about opportunities and knowing how to use and utilize your players.
Vinod, you know, you continue to be one of the leading correspondents in cricket in the Caribbean. When the synopsis of this particular Test series is over, what would be the selectors, what would be the president, what would they be looking at in the boardroom about what has gone wrong? The T20 series, total disaster. The T20 players don't seem to be getting better. A lot of the T20 players don't even want to play for the West Indies. Narayan is still not playing. Obviously, Dwayne Bravo is injured. You've got Russell playing in Sri Lanka when his team is getting beaten in New Zealand. What really is going on in West Indies cricket that we still have the same situation where a lot of players are saying, no, thank you, we don't want to play at the moment? Lendl Simmons is another one. Evan Lewis is another one. What's the real situation?
Well, Barry, I think the West Indies Cricket Board, they have some problems on their hands and they need to meet with these players. They have to find a clear way forward. We can't continue like this because, you know, I saw Romario Shepherd getting 153 in the A-team game. It reminded me of a young Andrew Russell getting a lot of runs against England on an A-team tour. But, you know, I want to temper, you know, my excitement about Romario Shepherd because pretty soon, you know, he may go on to greater things and then he might not be available to play for the West Indies. So we need to find a way forward. We can't just sit down and say that, you know, we are a board that allows players, you know, to choose. We have to have some sort of guidelines. I remember during the CPL a couple of seasons ago, all the Pakistani players left and they went home. What did they go home for? Not to play cricket, Barry. They went to attend a camp. So I think there's something has to be done. Good news, though, is that Sunil Narayan has indicated to the Trinidad and Tobago selectors that he is available to play for Trinidad and Tobago in the Super 50 that comes up in February. And a little birdie whistle to me that will be played in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is good news because at least, once he wants to play for Trinidad and Tobago, obviously he wants to get back into the West Indies fold. I don't know what's the situation with Lendl Simmons and Evan Lewis, but I think basically, Barry, if I have to sum it up, our performances in New Zealand and the fact that our players are here, there, and everywhere, but not where they ought to be, I think we have mental issues, mental problems in West Indies cricket, and we really, really need to sort it out. And Wagner has shown, as Tino Best said it, that spirit. We need that spirit in the West Indies team. We need that sort of enforcer. And what's a funny thing? The man who talked about a man being an enforcer tonight would have been perfect in this situation. That is Tinola Bertram Best.
I don't know which birds are chirping in your ear, but I was hearing that it was going to be played in Antigua. We wait to see. Either way, still good that cricket will be coming back to the region, because we have not really seen a lot of cricket in the region, obviously because of the dreaded coronavirus pandemic. Next year is going to be a very interesting year to see how the cricket calendar will indeed go. Well, look, gentlemen, I want to thank you. Final 30 seconds from everyone. Tino, we're going in, of course, now to day 4, 196 for 6. What is your hope for West Indies in day 4?
Jermaine Blackwood, 225. Azari Joseph, 160. I am an optimist. I've got to stick with my boys.
Vinod Namchan?
Well, probably a double century for Jermaine Blackwood, a century for young Azari Joseph. And since we are being so predictive and so overwhelmingly confident, probably Tino Best to make a return to West Indies.
Yeah, you reduced the conversation to a level of ridiculousness. But Aaron Vals, last 30 seconds with you.
Yeah, unfortunately, boys, I'm just going to have to bring a bit of a dampener down. I do think that New Zealand will probably end it by probably the evening session on day 4, to be honest, as long as the weather's okay. I mean, you look at the swing, if the overhead conditions are cloudy again, you've got the likes of Southey, Bolt, Wagner's looking incredible, Jameson was absolutely sensational again. I just feel like it's New Zealand's game to lose from here. I know anything can happen in Test cricket, I'm not going to rule it out, but yeah, I'd say New Zealand are firm favourites heading into today.
All right, well, we've got the feed up. Everything looks A-OK now. So thank you so much for joining us on tour. Let's go across and see how the West Indies will continue on day 4.
The toughest time to jump up, people, are you ready? Windies in the land of